Coming to you live from the studios. This is Devyn and Jenna with the latest updates on disease. So tell me, Devyn, what is today's disease update?
I'm glad you asked, because today we will be discussing Huntington's disease. I'm sure many of you have heard about Huntington's disease at least once in your life, but if you aren't too familiar with the disease, Huntington's disease is an inherited disorder that affects the brain caused by a mistake in the DNA encoding for an autosomal dominant gene called Huntington. It involves the progressive degeneration of nerve cells in the brain, specifically within the basal ganglia. In general, the Huntington gene plays an important role in nerve cells, also known as neurons, in the brain, and is essential for normal development before birth.
Wait, if Huntington's disease is inherited, what are the chances that someone will inherit the faulty gene?
It's a 50-50 chance, but don't panic just yet, because although anyone can develop Huntington's disease, it tends to run in people with European descent according to the Cleveland Clinic. Please note that the main factor is whether you have a parent with Huntington's disease. With a prevalence of 5.7 per 100,000 people in North America, we will dive into a case study to discuss further. Jenna, would you like to take it away with the case study?
Sure. Today's case study is a 41-year-old male school teacher who presents with a diagnosis of early-stage Huntington disease. At work, Mr. McGee experiences trouble writing and typing. Mr. McGee appeared to be highly agitated today as he spoke at an increased volume and speed. Due to the high stress during exam season, Mr. McGee has noticed the symptoms as he has been more irritable than usual over the last month. In addition, he has difficulty controlling his hands and fingers due to uncontrolled movements, making it difficult to grade exams. Mr. McGee and will get aids and appears moderately fit. However, he collapses heavily into the chair when asked to sit down.
Right off the bat, what is one thing you noticed about the case study?
Well, first, Mr. McGee is a 41-year-old man who is showing early signs of degeneration in his physical, mental, and emotional abilities. He appears to lose a bit of control with his varying moods and behavior, but he seems well aware of his symptoms.
That's a good observation. It's important to note that a typical onset occurs at age 30 or 40 years of age, but Huntington's disease can develop in children and young adults. Mr. McGee recognized that he was not feeling his usual self and consulted his physician, who referred him to a neurologist. What happened next?
After conducting a genetic test with Mr. McGee, neurologists determined that Mr. McGee tested positive for Huntington's disease. Treatment interventions aimed at improving functional tasks such as typing on a keyboard or writing on a board. Mr. McGee also focused on aerobic exercises and respiratory muscle training that would be beneficial for him in the future, as Huntington is a progressive degenerative disease.
At his initial visit, the following treatments were implemented: respiratory training, aerobic training, postural and balance training, education on conservation of energy during movement, and training on functional reach and grasp activities. To diagnose and monitor the disease's progression, Mr. McGee underwent several clinical tools, such as the Unified Huntington's Disease Rating Scale, which encompasses motor, cognitive, behavioral, and functional domains. Other outcome measures were 6-minute walk tests, patient-specific functional scale, and timed up and go. Jenna, why don't you tell them about some of the results of these tests?
Mr. McGee scored an average of 6.7 for the patient-specific functional scale. For context, ability to do various tasks, usually tasks that are specific to the patient, are scaled from 0 to 10. Being unable to perform the activity, and 10 being able to perform the activity at the same level as before the diagnosis. In the 6-minute walk test, Mr. McGee got a score of 450.7 meters, which is within the average range. For the tug, he scored 8 seconds without cognitive tasks and 13.2 with cognitive tasks. Getting a score of 14 seconds or above is an indicator of increased risk of fall with Huntington's. So now Mr. McGee isn't at an increased risk of recurrent falls, but is getting closer to it.
So really, what does this all mean? Mr. McGee has gone through all the tests to see the status of this progressive disorder. So how does he manage the disease? What now?
I'm so glad you asked. Mr. McGee received a treatment plan involving physiotherapy, occupational therapy, a psychologist, and even a social worker.
His physiotherapy involved a long list of exercises that involved practicing his motor control in the upper extremities and respiratory muscle training. It's a clearly outlined plan with weekly frequency and intensity of exercises like aerobic exercise 3 to 5 times a week, yoga or tai chi, and neuromotor exercises to maintain balance, coordination, and proprioception.
Wow, that's a lot. It says here that he's also practicing his handwriting skills with an occupational therapist and working to teach stress with mindfulness and motivational techniques. They also discuss reducing clutter and slippery floors in the house to prevent potential falls.
He also goes to a psychologist to manage coping with the diagnosis of the disease and visits his regular family physician for neurological screening and medication prescriptions.
It's definitely a lot to manage, but it's important to address as many symptoms of the disease through a multidisciplinary approach. Let's see what it did in his 1-year follow-up.
Well, as you know, Huntington's disease is a progressive disorder. The hope is that the treatment prevented too much change. In Mr. McGee's 6-minute walk test, he obtained a score of 484.9 meters, which is 34.2 meters longer than his initial test. Unfortunately, his patient-specific functional scale score decreased to an average score of 6. And he did a bird balance test, which is similar to the tug, and got results that indicated an increased risk of falls.
Huntington's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder that does not have a cure. Many of the treatments that we see implemented for Mr. McGee doesn't cure the disease and instead only manages the symptoms of the disease. Devyn, have you heard of the new gene therapies that have been explored as potential solutions for genetic diseases like Huntington's?
Yes, I heard about some upcoming treatments in the works that hold potential for a cure. One of them is through the use of the CRISPR-Cas9 system. Some people call this the genetic scissors because it targets faulty areas of the genome to cut out. A single guide RNA binds to Cas9 to direct the system to the target genome site. Cas9 breaks the double-stranded DNA and stimulates non-homologous end joining. This repair mechanism can introduce indels, or insertions and deletions to the system, and lead to nonsense mutations and disable the formation of mutant Huntingtin protein responsible for Huntington's disease. Studies done by Ekman et al. Found that this system increases lifespan and decreases motor deficits in mouse models. The hope is that these results can also be translated into larger animal models and eventually get to the clinical trial phase.
We've known about the genetic mutations for Huntington's for a while, but there's still no cure. If you think about it, that's just like the disease we talked about last week, Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
You're right. DMD even utilizes the 6-minute walk test as a gauge of disease progression. Both disease treatments also work on maintaining the ability to do everyday tasks with occupational therapy and maintaining movement abilities with physiotherapy.
Because there's no cure, the standard of care is treating symptoms. Duchenne muscular dystrophy, Huntington's disease are both progressive genetic diseases without a cure and have multidisciplinary treatment plans involving a number of different specialties. It really goes to show how medicine is a team effort.
That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, take care.